She laughed in front of everyone and said, "I could leave you right now," expecting him to beg, to break, to chase. But the single dad calmly looked her in the eyes and replied, "Go ahead." What happened next shattered reputations, exposed a secret buried for 7 years, and proved that sometimes the quietest man in the room is the most dangerous one to underestimate. If you believe in real twists, emotional revenge, and stories that stay with you long after the last word, subscribe now, because this story changes everything you think you know about love, pride, and walking away. She laughed at the party the way people laugh when they think they hold all the power, the sound sharp and careless, echoing above the soft jazz and clinking glasses in a rented London townhouse that smelled of money and borrowed confidence, and everyone within earshot turned their heads because public humiliation always attracts an audience, especially when the man standing quietly beside her was known only as the single dad, the one who arrived alone, no flashy stories, no loud presence, just a calm posture and tired eyes that had seen more nights awake than nights out. And when she raised her glass and said, "I could leave you right now," it wasn't a joke but a declaration, rehearsed in her mind long before the party began, because she believed moments like these were meant for dominance, for reminding a man of his place, and the laughter that followed from her friends felt like approval, like permission, like victory, yet he didn't flinch, didn't rush to defend himself, didn't even glance at the crowd, he simply nodded once, slowly, and said, "Go ahead," in a tone so steady it sliced through the noise. And for a second the room shifted, not dramatically, not loudly, but in that subtle way when reality corrects an assumption, because she had expected pleading or anger or shame, not indifference, not relief, and as she stared at him searching for the crack, the weakness, the man she thought she owned emotionally, she found nothing but resolve, and memories began to rush through her mind of how they met 3 years earlier when she was climbing her career ladder in Manchester and he was just a widower with a 6-year-old son and a second-hand car, how she had loved the way he listened more than he spoke, how she had admired his devotion until it bored her, how she had slowly started seeing him as an accessory rather than a partner, something safe but unimpressive, and she never noticed when safety turned into strength because strength doesn't announce itself, it waits, and as the guests awkwardly drifted back to their conversations, she followed him into the hallway, heels clicking like accusations, demanding to know why he wasn't fighting for her, and that was when he finally looked at her fully, not with anger, but with clarity, and told her that a man who has already lost everything once is not afraid of losing the wrong thing again, and she scoffed, thinking it was another line, another quiet man philosophy, unaware that 7 years earlier, on a rainy night in Birmingham, he had made a choice that saved her future and destroyed his own without ever telling her, a choice that involved a letter, a signature, and a secret that would soon claw its way back into the light, because walking away from her wasn't weakness, it was the final step of a plan that had started long before the party lights turned on. The truth didn't surface all at once but in fragments, the way real lives unravel, beginning the next morning when her phone buzzed nonstop with messages she didn't understand, colleagues asking if she was okay, if she had known, if she had seen the documents circulating quietly through professional circles in London and Leeds, documents tied to a startup acquisition she had taken full credit for years ago, the same acquisition that launched her career and built her reputation, and as panic crept in, she remembered the night she almost gave up. 7 years earlier, when a failed venture and mounting debt had pushed her to the edge, the night she had cried on the phone to a man she barely knew yet, a man who listened in silence and then asked her one question: if someone took the risk for you, would you walk away or build something worth saving? And she never knew that the next day he sold the only property he owned, his late wife's house, and anonymously absorbed the debt through a legal workaround that erased her failure from public record, a move that legally bound him to silence and excluded him from future claims, including recognition, and when the leaked documents revealed that the anonymous guarantor was him, the single dad she laughed at, the room she was standing in felt suddenly too small, because she realized the man she tried to belittle had once held her entire future in his hands and chose to save it without asking for love, loyalty, or even gratitude, and while she rushed to confront him, crossing cities and rehearsing apologies that sounded hollow even to herself, he was at a school play, sitting in the front row, clapping for his son who had learned resilience from watching a father rebuild his life brick by brick, and when she finally stood before him, stripped of pride and performance, demanding to know why he never told her, he answered that love given to control is a transaction, but love given in silence is a gift, and he had given her one she didn't deserve, and as she begged for another chance, promising change, promising humility, he gently shook his head and said that some lessons arrive too late because they are meant to be carried forward, not used to reopen doors, and she walked away this time not laughing, not powerful, but transformed, while he returned home knowing that walking away wasn't the end of his story. It was the moment his son would grow up knowing that dignity, once chosen, can never be taken away. The aftermath unfolded quietly at first, not with headlines or dramatic confrontations, but with the slow, irreversible shift of consequences settling into place, because when truth finally surfaces it doesn't shout, it rearranges lives, and for her the days after the revelation felt like walking through a city where every familiar street had subtly changed direction, where colleagues smiled with a hint of caution, where praise was now followed by silence, and where invitations thinned without explanation, not because she had committed a crime, but because people had learned something far more unsettling, that the foundation of her success rested on a sacrifice she neither acknowledged nor respected, and while no one openly accused her, the unspoken judgment was heavier than any confrontation, forcing her to sit alone in her apartment replaying that laugh at the party, the sound now echoing like a crack in glass, while across town the single dad's life continued with almost stubborn normalcy as he packed lunches, fixed broken toys, and attended parent-teacher meetings, yet beneath that routine something was changing for him too, because offers began arriving quietly from people who had once overlooked him, not out of pity but respect, individuals who valued integrity more than bravado, and one evening, as rain tapped gently against his kitchen window, he received a letter, not an email, not a call, but a handwritten letter, from the same woman who once laughed, and in it she didn't ask for forgiveness or another chance, she simply acknowledged the truth without defending herself, admitting that she had mistaken confidence for worth and noise, for power, and that losing him had forced her to finally confront the emptiness she had been decorating for years, and he read the letter once, folded it carefully, and placed it in a drawer, not as a trophy or a wound, but as proof that people can change even if they cannot return, and months later, at a modest community event celebrating local entrepreneurs, he stood on a small stage holding his son's hand while being recognized for mentorship and quiet leadership, and as the applause rose, not thunderous, not theatrical, but genuine, his son looked up and asked why people were clapping, and he smiled and said, because sometimes doing the right thing takes a long time to be noticed, and in that moment, somewhere in the back of the room, she stood unseen, having come not to reclaim anything but to witness the man she once underestimated become exactly who he had always been, complete without her, and as she left before the applause ended, she understood the final truth of that night at the party, that when she said she could leave him right now, she thought she was issuing a threat, but what she was really doing was freeing a man who had already learned how to stand alone, and in freeing him, she lost the only person who had ever loved her without needing to be louder than her laughter, and the story didn't end with reunion or revenge, but with something rarer and more lasting, the quiet triumph of a man who chose dignity, a child who inherited strength, and a woman who learned too late that the most powerful people never need to raise their voice to be heard.